Hey, and welcome to the highlights of episode number 181 with Dr. Shefali. Some of my favorite parts of this episode were when she shares about how we can consciously parent and step parent. I also loved when she talked about how to not react to our children's triggers, how to heal our inner child, and how to reparent ourselves. I also loved her best relationship tips, her advice if your partner is not on board, how to heal our relationship with our own parents, and how to find our tribe. But there is so much more wisdom and inspiration that you get in the full episode. So, to listen to the full podcast and get all the info in the show notes, head on over to melissaambrosini.com/181 right now. Dr. Shefali, I am so excited to have you on the show. You have been on my dream interview list for a very long time, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm presuming you didn't come out of the womb preaching conscious parenting and consciousness. So can you take us back and tell us your story and how you got to where you are today, doing the absolutely magnificent work that you now do?
Oh, well, so I grew up in India and had an unremarkable childhood in terms of trauma or deep anguish, but I had a very, I would say, healthy family relationship with my parents and came to America at 21 out of a great thirst to experience something different. I knew my culture was handicapped in some ways in terms of its tradition and its attachment to dogma and hierarchy. So that bothered me about my culture a great deal growing up. I felt very stifled as a woman, very objectified, and wanted to really run away from the cultural doctrines that I was observing. And so I came to America at 21 and immediately, actually, I would say serendipitously, threw myself into spirituality. It just fascinated me literally a month after coming here. Now, I cannot say that I had a discerning thought process that took me to it. I just went for my first silent 10-day retreat within a few months of arriving here. And it was just a pull. I can't explain it any other way. I wasn't in trauma. I hadn't broken up. I wasn't in heartbreak. I just was compelled. It was time. And since then, I've been on a very strong spiritual pursuit. However, because I started young and I was still heavily indoctrinated by what I grew up with, I did make a lot of detours away from that path as well. And I kept returning, I kept leaving, I kept returning, I kept leaving. But it stayed a parallel process. I did the traditional cultural prescriptive things of, get a master's, get a PhD, get married, have a child, try and be successful, try and achieve. I tried to do all that, but always had this very growing, burgeoning passion in consciousness and kept writing on the side. And then one day just decided to leave this traditional world and kind of really go deep dive into consciousness and began, in my 30s, really meditating more and more and writing more. And that's when I began publishing my books and, letting go of this very material world and really entering the deeper spiritual, psychological world. And I had to pay a price, I had to let go of a lot of relationships, undergo a lot of transformation, really shed the skin that I had been falsely living under, let go of a lot of masks, and renegotiate a whole new life based on this very budding passion within me to be a spiritual seeker, a teacher, and a wisdom, author.
So, what is conscious parenting? What does that mean?
It's really a paradigm shift. It's a complete revolutionary way to look at traditional parenting. So, what is traditional parenting? Because if I outline that a little bit, then I can tell you how conscious parenting is not that. Traditional parenting is hierarchical, it's dogmatic, it's linear, it's controlling, it's very fear based, and it's dictated by external markers, how good the child is, how well behaved the child is, how compliant the child is, how successful the child is, how happy the child is. It's based on all these outer personas of behavior. And conscious parenting is the complete opposite of that. It's non-hierarchical, non-linear, non-dogmatic, non-traditional. It's all about mutual reciprocity. It's about seeing the child as an awakener. It's about understanding that the child before you has been invoked by your spiritual journey, really, to awaken you to a higher calling. And you are not the master of the child. You are here to grow along the child. And really, you have to raise yourself first before you raise your child.
So, for someone listening who's like, oh dear, I should have done some work before I brought my children or child into the world. What can we do now? Like, how can we step into more of a conscious parenting role, even if we have a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, or a 25-year-old, no matter where we are in our journey? Like, how can we start to implement some more of these conscious parenting behaviors and shift things as of right now?
Yeah, so we now realize that it's about seeing our children completely differently and understanding that it's not about them, and it's perhaps mostly always been about us. So now in this moment, instead of looking outward at them to fix and control and manage them, we turn the spotlight within and ask ourselves, how are we co-creating this moment right now? How are we energetically showing up right now that is contributing to the problem I believe my child is displaying? How can I better meet the needs of my child beneath the behavior and connect to who it is they authentically are? Because I want nothing greater than to be authentically connected to. So how can I show up more fully, more present, more engaged with my child? Because these are the things that I wanted as a child and they were never done with me.
So they are our biggest mirrors. They're our teachers.
Oh, they are completely our teachers, because you see, with other people, our ego is somewhat in check, somewhat. With another adult, we won't be so rampaging in our incessant anxiety or incessant desire that our expectations be met right now. With other people, we kind of back off. But with our children, we unleash our ego. And so if we use this relationship as an opportunity to see the ego, then it's actually the greatest portal for growth. It's like if you can drive in New York, you can drive anywhere. So if you can see the ego in your parent-child relationship, then you can see the ego everywhere else. And if you free yourself of the ego in the parent-child relationship, then you kind of let go everywhere else, because nowhere is the ego more dominant and dogmatic than in the parent-child relationship, because we are under this delusion that the child is really ours. We've been fooled to believe that they're really ours. So therefore they are our property, they are our ownership, and we can control them. And this is an illusion.
Mm. It is the biggest illusion. They are their own sovereign being. Step parenting, and I'd love your take on this, it comes with a whole lot of other things that you need to work through. So, does this completely apply to the step parents that are listening as well?
Absolutely. It could apply to a step parent who decides that they are now a parent, right? Or that they need to step in, or they need to be given significance. We can, that ego of ours is so crazy and out of control that it can be invoked anywhere. But if the step parent was really able to take this advice and understand the spirit of consciousness, they would realize what a gift it is that they can be in adoration and connection with this child, this being, and simply enjoy them like a grandparent would, without all their ego getting all entangled. They can enjoy this child where a parent really can't enjoy the child, because the parent has to go through this whole process of letting go. But the step parent already kind of has let go. And that's such a great position. But yet, there are many step parents who get all entangled because they feel that, they deserve some sort of respect, or they are entitled to some sort of control.
How can we, when we feel triggered by our children, how can we move through that as the witnesser?
Yeah, you can't do it in the heat of the moment. You have to train yourself outside the heat of the moment. In the heat of the moment, forget it. I lose my temper all the time. So I've just trained myself to now know, you know, don't react, because the consequences are worse If you react, then you'll be feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, feeling regretful, then you'll go the other way. So it's almost now, a reward to not react, So when parents begin to see the rewards of not reacting, but let me tell you, it takes enormous discipline to not react in the moment. And therefore, meditation practice, learning consciousness, taking courses, really training yourself in the fundamentals and the principles of not entering that tide, the wave, and instead stepping onto the shore, not getting onto the train, stepping onto the platform and watching and taking that pause, just take a 10-second pause and just enter the breath and understand that all reaction is coming out of fear. So we have to ask ourselves, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of detaching control from? And when we begin to deconstruct, we begin to realize our fears are pretty baseless and there's nothing to really be so scared of. And now we can enter the present moment and begin to connect more with our children.
What is control all about, and how can we let it go?
Control is all about the delusion that we own our children and we can mandate their lives. And the basis of it is the fear of the inevitable truth that our children do not belong to us. We're afraid of that truth. We want them to belong to us. That's why we became parents. So once we confront the greatest truth of this farce, that we don't own anybody and our children are here to enact their own destiny, then of course, yes, we'll guide them, we'll be present, we're there every day, telling them to eat the kale and not the cookie. Yeah, but we're not doing it with this anxiety that we get to control them. And if they don't, then we get to punish them. It's coming from a very different place of friend. Parents don't want to be their kid's friend. I go, yeah, you should be your kid's friend, which doesn't mean that you're their buddy going to drink with them, but it means that you're their soul's friend. You're an ally, you're a guide, you're a deep, deep, deep partner. When you begin to think in those terms, you leave behind the dogma of hierarchy and control and dominance.
And I love that you say, like, our children are not our easels. So
Yes.
what do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly. That they're not some blank canvas that we get to paint our destiny on and all our unmet desires and dreams on. They are vital, throbbing beings here to enact their own destiny. And the reason we put our destiny onto theirs is because we don't have the guts and gumption and courage to go do it ourselves. So we use our children all the time to live out our fantasies. Why do we need our children to be great? Why do we need our children to be successful? If they want to be successful, if they want to be great and famous, then they will. Why do we need them to be? Because we're afraid they will be homeless. Well, who said they're going to be homeless? And if they're homeless and they are okay with it, what are you going to do about it? It's really about having the wisdom to know your role and to know your place, to stay on your own yoga mat, so to speak, to stay in your own lane. And that includes with children, but it doesn't mean hands off parenting. It doesn't mean not being there every day. It doesn't mean not trying to guide them and awaken them. But it certainly does mean not to impose our agenda, our expectations.
How does this apply to doing like our own inner child healing work?
Yeah, that's the most important. In all my books, I talk about doing the inner child work because what comes out in those tantrums are the fearful needs, unmet needs of the inner child. When we tantrum and rage and control, it's really because the inner child is feeling scared and executes the ego, the defense shield, to protect it. So the ego yells and screams and threatens and punishes. But underneath that ego is really a very scared child who feels unheard, unseen, and unmet. So it's all about meeting the needs of the inner child so you don't use the shield of the ego to create dysfunction.
So, what about for someone listening who maybe they're on this journey or they started on this journey and their partner isn't? What can we do then?
Yeah, well, then you start making choices, uncomfortable choices, difficult choices. You first start the traditional way by changing them. You take them to a therapist, you beg them, you plead with them, you threaten them. Then you realize, oh, holy moly, this is not working. So what will work? And, then you have to make choices. If they're not willing to change, what are you going to do? You have to accept them as they are, or change them. If that doesn't work, then you can change yourself in some way, not to get so triggered by them, maybe, not to get so irritated by them, not to be so afraid of them, maybe. And then your last choice is, do I need to leave them? Can I release them? Should I release them? It's not, there's no technique to get someone to be conscious. They have to want it whenever they're ready, and they may not be ready while you're alive. So, do you want to suffer, or do you want to make a different choice for yourself? It's scary.
So true. So true. But I'd love to hear, what are your biggest tips or advice on having a beautiful, conscious, evolved relationship with your beloved? Like, what are some of your practical tips?
Well, I think you have to be real with yourself and understand your patterns and see why you attracted this person in your life, and are you able to continue to grow together? And if you are able to grow together, then that's a match for you in this moment of time. And you both support each other to really be truthful and transparent as much as possible, create the safety so people feel free to be authentic and free to be themselves. And if it's not a match, then also do it beautifully and release each other with compassion and freedom to not be a match. It doesn't matter what the other person is, it's how you are with them. And if you're able to be free and authentic, you stay with them. But ways to foster that is really to be whole. The more whole you are within, the more whole you'll be without, and the more whole you'll allow them to be. And you'll be okay with their imperfections because you're accepting yourself. So the more you accept yourself without transaction, without conditionality, that's how you more accept the other.
My parents, they may not ever get on this journey in this lifetime, and that's okay. But
Hmm.
how can I heal my relationship or anything with them without ever having conversations with them about it? Do you know what I mean?
I don't believe you need to actually talk with them and resolve things with them. You need to resolve it in your own mind
Yeah, exactly.
and understand your relationship from your point of view. And I don't subscribe to the fact that you have to confront and have your parents say sorry, and you have to blame them, and you have to, get everything out in the open. I mean, if that happens and it happens organically, sure, but it's not a mandatory step to healing. The real healing takes place in our own consciousness when we understand what the relationship was about. We understand how our inner child wasn't met. When we understand the unmet needs of our parents' inner child, and we release and let go. And then we grieve the loss of that self. And then we seek to reparent ourselves as adults, seek to enter a loving, worthy relationship with our adult selves.
Exactly. Something that I've been doing a lot of as well is this reparenting myself.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
how do we do that?
Well, we reparent ourselves by seeing the inner child come up in the present moment and understanding that it's come up because it needs to be healed. So at that moment, it's needing you to give it what the original parents could never give it, which is a listening ear, an open heart, validation, normalization, and a deep compassion. And when that inner child feels heard and met by your adult self, then it'll less likely cause you to act out in some way. So it's really about looking inward and feeling connected to the needs from within.
So, how can we build more tribe within our own life?
Well, I think it's about aligning with people who are more like you and moving away from those who are not. And also then maintaining and fostering gatherings, to create the gathering space, to create the space where people are able to connect to each other, opportunities for that. People are thirsty for this, and all they're waiting for is an opportunity.